Hello, I'm Mandla Lupondwana.
And I'm Aevia. Today, we are continuing with our lockdown tips for the family, and we are focusing on compassion.
And our text for today comes from the book of Jude. Now, Jude only has one chapter. So it's Jude chapter 1, verse 22. And it says,
And for some, have compassion, making a difference.
And when we are talking about compassion, we would like to focus on three things. One, we'd like to focus on those people we may need to check up on during this lockdown period. Secondly, those people we may need to advocate for. And thirdly, those people we need to add to our prayer list. We'll start with the first one, the people we need to check up on during this lockdown period.
Those people are like our seniors, people who are advanced in age and they're living either alone or with a spouse. We're also looking at those who may be in a frail care institution. They are not able to entertain visitors, they're not able to go anywhere, and because of the lockdown, they're not even able to fellowship at church. Let us keep them in mind. We also have our young adults. They're not able to have their regular routine of waking up and going to work, being able to hang out with friends.
Have social, human contact.
Yes, so they end up being alone. Let us reach out to them to show them that we care and that we're thinking about them.
Just to call them and have a conversation with them, check on them and see how they're doing. And secondly, we would like you to consider checking up on people who may be alone during this time because of a recent tragedy. Now that may be because of a spouse that may have passed away, or because of a recent divorce. Now you may be wondering, why am I including divorce in this whole tragedy list? Well, simply because generally people don't get married in order to get divorced. Of course, there are those dodgy people who do, but generally people don't. When they get married, they want to stay married. And even when they file for divorce, the initial intention was never to divorce. This is why I refer to it as a tragedy. Now, for some of them, this may be the first time they are having a break from work and the business of life without the former spouse. And it would be good if someone were to call, check up on them and say, how you're doing. Now, if you've never really had a conversation with these people, it was just hi, it would be very odd for you to call out of the blue, hey, what's up? Corona. It's gonna really sound and feel dodgy, like you're fishing out for information. It would be good for those people who are there to provide support. Before the funeral, during the funeral, after the funeral, you are best placed to make that call to check how the person is doing. You may have been there providing support, lending a listening ear during and after the divorce proceedings. You may be the best person to call to see how you're doing. It feels like it's compassion, not just somebody who's trying to get some info because they've got nothing better to do with their lives. So those are the people we hope that you will include in your list of people you're going to check up on during this lockdown period. Remembering Jude 1:22. And for some, have compassion, making a difference. Our second category are those people who may need to advocate for.
People who have responsibilities and find themselves in meetings where they have to make very important decisions that would have an impact on the lives of many. Please remember those who do not have a voice and speak for them.
In those meetings, please advocate for them. Because sometimes we make decisions because we are looking at what's good for the organization, what's good for the company, what's good for the structure that we are serving in. But there are lives that are going to be affected by the decisions we're making. Please advocate for those who are not in the meeting, for those who cannot be in the meeting, but whose lives will be impacted by our decisions. There are other people whose lives and livelihoods do not depend on the decisions we make. But you may have some influence to kind of improve their lot in life. These are people who may even be in a completely different industry. I'll make an example. This morning I had a conversation with a friend who's in the taxi industry. And in the conversation we talked about how now they have to carry half the load they generally carry because of the social distancing.
Yes. That they put in place.
And so in the conversation it transpired that as much as they have to carry half the load, it doesn't appear that they'll be benefiting from this fund of businesses that are going to struggle because of Corona. And I wished I had the influence to advocate so that they could somehow be assisted. They're not the only ones who may need assistance during this time period, but This is just an example,
example.
where it's, you can't make a decision, but if you can influence that somebody is taken care of, somebody's situation is looked at, please do so, because it's part of us showing compassion. Remembering Jude 1:22 that says, "And for some, have compassion, making a difference." A third category are people we may need to add to our prayer list.
Yes, there are people that when we pray, let's remember them. For example, our healthcare professionals, sorry.
Yes.
We've been talking about them a lot, but really, their lives are at risk. The simple act that we may take for granted of getting up and going to work puts them at a risk for them to contract this deadly virus. So when we pray, please keep those people in mind.
Not just them alone, their families.
Of course.
When a family member gets up in the morning to go to work and they may come back with the virus because they are a healthcare professional, it leaves you wondering every time they come back, go home, whether they're not coming back with the virus. So pray for the healthcare professionals and their families. There are people who are involved in security.
Oh yes, when we went to the mall, I was so surprised how many of them, they stand there and you must go and they'll spray the sanitizers or some kind of alcohol mixture on your hands,
Yes.
trying to help to keep us sanitized.
That is true. It's them, it's the police, it's
Yeah.
the people who are involved in the military. They are all trying to provide an essential service now during this lockdown period. And so we would ask you to, include them in your prayer, add them to your prayer list, because they also run a risk of contracting the COVID-19 virus.
Now that you're talking, I'm thinking about also the people who are in our shops. We're talking about, for example, our cashiers.
Yeah.
They're in direct contact with the public, one by one by one. So the risk of them picking up the virus from someone who's infected who may not even be showing symptoms is also very high.
Yes.
So we need to also think about those people.
Because they form part of the essential service in our
Yeah.
period, because the shops need to open. People who are involved in the taxi industry, they ferry people to and from work.
Yeah.
Let's remember them as well in our prayers. There are those people who are unable to stay at home
Yeah.
because for some reason they need to go to a shop, they need to stand in a line because they just got their money now. Let's please remember those people in our prayers. And when we do remember them in our prayers, we are trying to give effect to this text, Jude chapter 1 verse 22.
And for some, have compassion, making a difference.
May God richly bless you and show compassion to those around you. Thank you.